Hi, welcome.
Hello,
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
All right, how are you guys?
doing
Good,
good?
you good?
Good. All right, I like this already. You guys are vocal. That's a good thing.
Yeah,
Right
good.
on.
I'll talk before we get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, boy, you guys look young. Are you guys high school students?
Yep.
Yeah,
Aha. Yes,
Yes.
they don't tell me that. Um, yeah, so no, that's great. That's great. Getting an early jump on your credits. Do you guys have any idea what colleges you guys want to go to?
probably staying in Modesto Junior College for at least the next year before making a choice.
No,
But
that's good. There's nothing wrong with that, because, you're getting the same education pretty much. Even the bigger schools usually hire, part-timers like myself, to teach the lower division stuff. So you're getting the same education at a fraction of the price, for you and your parents. So that's a good idea. That's a really good idea. So I like that. Yeah, I myself, I went straight to a 4-year school and I was so lonesome my freshman year, and I was only an hour and a half away in the Bay Area. Uh, and yeah, to do it all over again, I may have taken the first year or two at JC myself. But
very
that's good. That's good, guys. That's really good. So yeah, I've been teaching this for 20 years already, and at first I wasn't too happy about it because I preferred Western Civ and world history, Latin American history, etc. But I've really come to love U.S. history. You dive into it, and you get into the arguments that historians have, and it becomes very, very interesting. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at different types of history, okay? Because I could not believe more firmly in the style that I teach history in now. Um, so, for instance, right, I remember taking a class, and a gentleman told me, what do you think, Mr. Cowell, about it was something in U.S. history. It might have been the Civil War, and he said that the business and manufacturing class and the Southern planters from the North and South, respectively, were trying to win allies in Congress in the West, and that's what slavery was all about. And so he asked me what I thought about it, and I was just being honest. I wasn't trying to be a smart aleck, but I said that's a good Marxist take on the Civil War, and he grinned from ear to ear, like he was surprised I said that. But I would sit under different professors, and I would get a very different take from each of them on the same stuff. And that's what convinced me. I thought, you know what? I'm not going to try to devise my own narrative of why I think things happen. Because when you get into causation, right, in history, it's argumentative. It's argumentative. It's subjective. It's not like, I don't believe in gravity, so I'll take a step off the building and I'm going to fall nevertheless because of the objective reality of gravity, right? So it's much more subjective when you get into causation in history. So for that reason, what I try to do is I try to every subject we go to, I go from different vantage points, different with different assumptions, looking for different types of data, and come up with like a completely different argument on the same topic, right? So what I want you to do is when you read this stuff, I can already tell you guys are very intelligent, and I'm not just saying that. Um, don't imbibe it like it's the gospel truth, right? Now, what I can tell you are the facts that I utilize for each of the arguments. Those should be trustworthy. I like to think that I use respectable books from respectable historians, and so the facts should be okay as far as their soundness, their truthfulness, etc. But what historians do, right, is they choose which facts they think are significant, right, and something being caused. And so that's why I couldn't believe more firmly in this approach. So what I ask you to do is you look at an argument in a piece, and I want you to tell me, just analyze it. You know, what's being assumed, what's being conveyed by the author, what maybe an example or two of how that author defends his or her thesis, and then give your evaluation. And your evaluation is anything that I don't grade you on your evaluation. I just want to see your take on it. Okay. If it's too narrow, if it's too one-sided, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So we got another name here. That's great. Let me get that down. And so, so at any rate, but what I'm hoping, right, is when you've read them all, you've gained a pretty good, decent command of the subject. And for any of you who are going to, even if just a couple of you are going to major in history, this is what you do in the master's program. Okay. They'll tell you, okay, here's the topic. At least that's what they did with me. They'll give me a topic and they'll say, okay, so-and-so's take on it versus so-and-so's take on it. I want you to read them both. I want you to analyze them both. And I want you to kind of synthesize, put it all together and tell me what your take is and why from what you've read. So you're not only getting kind of a step ahead if you decide to major in history, but I like to think also, right, that as citizens of this republic, this approach encourages you to be a critical thinker. Okay. Because as I think you could agree with me, mere memorization of someone's narrative on a topic is not very useful in your life. Okay, unless you get on Jeopardy or something, right? So so at any rate, don't I hope that you find history, if you're not a history major and you're just taking this as a prerequisite, I hope you find it a little bit more interesting than merely just memorizing someone's narrative on a given topic. Okay. So that's kind of me, and that's kind of my approach. Before I jump into the into a few different schools of history, do you guys have any comments or questions? You guys okay?
Are we going to be finding evidence like from articles and searching stuff up to back up points that we make
You
in
know
our
what? You know what? That would be a great idea, but most of the time, no. To be honest, Bryce, most of the time, I'm giving you the facts, and then I'm giving you an argument, and then you take those facts that I provide for you, and give your take on it. And remember also, what I might do if I were you is read the whole thing first, right? Because you
Right.
might read number 1 and think, wait a minute, there are plenty of facts in section number 2 that contradict this thesis, right? And so, but if you want to go the extra mile and you want to find evidence to either further support the thesis or refute it, I would reward you for that in points. So you're free to do that, but you don't have to.
So
Okay.
either we can either like prove that it's stronger or like kind of side with it or go against it.
That's right. That's right. But remember, the first thing you do, the first obvious thing you do, right, is on your analysis is you cite what the thesis was, whether you agree with it or not. Okay. You just show me, and that's going to be easy for you guys. I could tell. You're going to tell me right off the bat what the thesis was on that section and at least one example of supporting data used to support it. And then by all means, you are free to disagree with everything you read. Okay. You remember, I felt like when I put these together and wrote them, it was almost like acting, right? Because I'm either just just kind of copying a book that I had just read and I thought had an interesting thesis, and I'm trying to summarize it, or it was an interesting, very opinionated professor that I had sat under years ago. And so, like I said, it's never necessarily what I think, whatever I write. Okay. But I like to think also, right? If you become a history major, they have discourse, right? They have a discussion about certain facets to that that topic. and I like to think that I hit the major points of discourse on that topic. So again, helping you if you're a history major, you're, oh, I'm already familiar with that argument. Yeah, I know. He says such and such, and he cites this and that to support it, but he doesn't look at this, this, and this, etc. Okay. So I'm very eager to see what you guys have to say on your evaluations, to be honest, evaluating how credible you think it was or wasn't. Okay. So let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to go to this blank document, and I'm going to give a few examples of historiography. Historiography is just the art and science of history. Okay. So different schools. You have, for instance, court history. All right. In court history, just think of an emperor telling his or her scribe that he or she wants a history written about him and his reign as the emperor, right? So first of all, they're going to, the usual steps are they're going to select, they're going to interpret, and they're going to present facts that justify everything this emperor has done, right? And extol or praise him. Okay, so court history says that our so basically, right, it praises the winners. Okay, and by winners we borrow from sociology. Okay, and we go into the political area, we go into the economic area, and we go into the social area like culture, right? So sometimes in history, it seems as if there have been political, economic, and social, quote, winners in American history. And those people, we praise them if it's court history. So the obvious example, right, are the founding fathers, President Abraham Lincoln, etc., right? These people who have been successful in their position as the leaders of the country, and we pretty much justify and praise everything that they do. Okay. Then you have conflict history. In conflict history, as the name implies, it studies competition and conflict, and then it attempts to have the reader empathize with those who lost. Okay. So oftentimes, pardon me, oftentimes those by getting you to empathize with those who lost, oftentimes they make villains of those who won. So you know, you think of demographics. A demographic, all that means, right? Demos means the people in Greek. Demographic means a category of the people. Okay, any category that we put people in. So we have women, we have minorities. I know that name's not used very often anymore, but I think you know what I mean by that. Basically ethnic minorities, right? And you have those low on the socioeconomic ladder. All right. So that's conflict history. Any questions so far? All right.
Is there one that you see is used more? For the
Yes,
most part?
that's a great question. Most often it's this number 2, actually. Excuse me. Yeah, it's very kind of in vogue, if you will, to write conflict history right now. And matter of fact, what is often connected to it and almost the same is revisionist history. Revisionist just means you want to revise the court image, the initial image of the winners, right? So yeah, revisionist history, conflict history, I would definitely say are the most popular. Okay, that's a good
Thank you.
question. Uh-huh. Functional history looks at all of society as a living organism metaphor. Each demographic is viewed as to how it has contributed to the growth of the whole society. So an example of this, right? They don't look for heroes and villains. Example of this is how slave labor helped stir the Industrial Revolution and helped our capitalist development. They don't look at what the slaves suffered. They don't look at, you know, their misery, their exploitation, the fact that they weren't paid for their work. None of that, right? It's kind of a benign history. They look and just say, okay, the slaves metaphorically, if the U.S. is like a human body metaphor, then the slave labor were like the legs that helped carry it. Okay? So that's called functional history. And then when you get into causation, that's very opinion oriented, right? One of them is great man history. Now, this does not mean necessarily those leaders who were great people, okay? That really it's almost like a misnomer, a misnamed title. It really is powerful man history. So if you want to look at how things turned out the way they did, you look at presidents, you look at their cabinet members, you look at senators, and you look at the powerful leaders of the country at that time. Okay. Then there was a response to that, and it's called history from below. And you say, no, numerically, the majority of people were hardworking manual laborers, the middle class, etc., that have not been given their due. And we believe that the common people, their behavior, etc., have caused things to go in the direction in which they've gone. Okay? And that's called history from below. And then you have structural history. And those are faceless, large forces cause events to happen the way that they do. So, for instance, culture, the economy, etc. Okay? That's called structural history. Now, for me, right, so often you might hear from me in this class say that it's very seldom either or. To me, a good historian looks at all of this. Okay, I personally think it's all the above. I think you have to look at leaders because they're the obvious ones with the power levers in their hands. I think you can't deny the common people their part in causing events to occur the way in which they do. And And then, of course, I think you have to look at the economy and culture and large faceless forces as well. I personally think it's all the above. Okay. And on this one, I'm going to put one more word for history from below, and that is agency. Okay. With the term agency is kind of popular, it has been for a while in history. And it is just there to serve to remind us that just because a given demographic is at the bottom of the pyramid does not mean that they did not have free will and the ability to affect events. Okay. So for instance, when we're doing 101 and we do the Native Americans, right? Sadly, as far as land dispossession, as far as government and sovereignty over the land, as far as allocation of resources, all three, political, economic, and social, right? And as far as the ability to command culture, you could probably say that the Native Americans lost. Okay. But that does not mean that they did not have agency, right? That they didn't have at one time power in their hands and that their behavior, their decisions, etc., didn't matter. Because of course they did. All right. And of course, with Native Americans, they're very sensitive about that because you have early Spanish sources that depict them as like childlike victims, right? And in light of that word agency, the Native Americans, they find that to be condescending, even if their narrative does try to get us to feel sorry for the Native Americans, to feel a sense of like righteous anger for what happened to them, which is called indignation. They still don't like that. A lot of the Native American spokespeople, they want it known that they had agency. They made decisions that mattered. They had power at one time, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So these are kind of the main points, the main foundation from which I do my argumentative pieces. I try to always bear in mind these different types of history and these different theories on causation, okay, and so forth. So does anybody have any questions about that, like the basics of historiography?
Uh, I had one question or out clarification on functional history. Is
Sure.
it basically just saying or looking at the results and not the process of how they got the results?
Yeah, I like that. I do. I like that explanation. I think that's pretty fair. I do. Because they do, like I said, with slave labor, right? They go straight to the results. They go straight to the manner by which their labor and the cash crops that they harvested affected the economy at a given time. So yeah, Griffin, I think that's fair to say.
Okay,
That,
thank you.
that they're kind of results oriented. All
Mhm.
right. And you can imagine, right, with functional history, how people who identify with African Americans, Native Americans, the poor, and so forth, right? How they find that frustrating that there's no focus upon what they've suffered, right, and what they've endured.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And let's see here. Uh, and then it's kind of it really is conflict history, so I'm going to put it under that category. But you have Marxist history, right? Like I think of a guy named Howard Zinn and his famous book, A People's History on the US. And it assumes, right, that um, the capitalist system is basically rigged in favor of those with more capital. And remember, capital is money to start with, right? So money to invest in your machinery, money to hire workers, money to buy more land, or whatever it might be. They believe those who started off with more capital, with more money to play with, so to speak, that the capitalist system is in their favor, to the point of it being parasitically against, right? The heroes and the victims somewhat, right? And that is of the proletariat. And the proletariat, right, is just their word for the manual laborers, for those who work with their hands. And most of the time, right, it's also assumed that the proletariat are unskilled laborers. Because once you develop a skill, right, like an artisan, a skilled worker, then you're arguably a part of the middle class, and you have a fighting chance. But the proletariat, they don't carry with them a lot of skill. They do jobs, especially with the mechanization of production, how production has become used through machines. Their jobs are quite simple compared to a skilled worker. And sadly, right, if your job is less skilled, you are more replaceable, right? If you don't like the way that you're getting paid or treated, someone else can take your spot. So they want you to empathize with the proletariat. All right. So I think that's all as far as the major themes that kind of form the foundation of my class. Okay. With these different types of history. I don't pretend that this is all of them, but these are mostly the ones that I utilize. Okay. So at any rate, why don't we go ahead and take a look at the sample? All right, let's see here. So what you see here, right, is the classic granted but approach. I say, okay, because there is a scarcity of written sources here in the US on Native American history prior to Columbus's arrival, we largely have to utilize the scientific methods, and even in using them, right, at best, what we're often doing is inference. And remember, inference is when you find scattered facts and you use logic to connect the dots, right? So I say, you know what? For having such a tough quest before us, I say, granted, there are a decent number of scientific methods that we have that have been pretty darn helpful. Okay, so I start mentioning them here. Tree ring dating, which is dendrochronology. Carbon-14 dating, right? See how much C14 is left in something, and thereby determine its age. Thermoluminescence dating somehow discovers when a piece of pottery or something that had been heated was first devised, was first heated. Okay. Suboceanic isotope analysis. I have not studied that at all. That's over my head. But supposedly that's what they use to discern if and when we've had ice ages from the bottom of the ocean. All right. Then we study pollen, disease, epidemiology, molecular and evolutionary biology, microsatellite analysis, stratigraphy. Stratigraphy is fun to me. Trying to read about stratigraphic findings, right? Is supposedly they go to a certain area and they look at prevailing winds and rainfall, etc., and they draw conclusions about the rate of erosion. And then they see just how far something is beneath the ground. And then what they do is they hope to luck out and find hardpan, limestone, or some type of hard impenetrable rock that stops a given level from descending any further in depth under the ground. Then when they get to that same level over the hard rock, they look at the mineralogy of the soil. And supposedly that can greatly differ from place to place. So the amount of, for instance, nitrogen can greatly vary, etc. So if they find, right, that let's say, 20, 30 feet beneath the ground, a certain level of soil that seems to be homogeneous, like all the same in mineral makeup, and it's all over and stopped over a stone, right? What they have found, and of course they carbon date as well, but they find that they come to the conclusion that those things at that same stratigraphic level underground were contemporaneous. They lived and existed at the same time. And we've lucked out. For instance, it was, I can't remember if it was a woolly mammoth or a mastodon, but it was one of the big animals, the megafauna, during the Archaic period at the end of the Ice Age. And it has an intelligently constructed, fluted projectile point caught in its ribs. And then there's a human with an atlatl, which was a throwing spear, at the same stratigraphic level as that mastodon. So they came to the conclusion, right, that man was contemporaneous with the big animals and that he hunted them. Okay, so they've gotten lucky in that respect, in some instances of stratigraphy. Okay, so I go on to say how they have come into some findings with that. All right, but here's the but, right? So I have the granted. Then what I do is I find instances in which, right, these methods have holes in them. So look at carbon dating. All right, it assumes that you have the same radiometric pressure and the same amount of carbon-14 in the atmosphere today as you did back then. Well, we have tested nuclear weapons. We have used nuclear weapons. Other things have happened environmentally with industrialization that may have affected the radiometric and the barometric pressure. And if they have, and if they've changed, then carbon-14 dating no longer seems to be very reliable. Okay. With tree ring dating, they have to have rings of uniform width, and that's not always the case. And then in some cases, evidently, they have missing or false rings in the trees that could give us a false reading of how old something is. And then you also have aberrations, right? Like situations out of the norm in which Native Americans built on an older edifice of wood and built newer wood over it. And so we get it wrong exactly when they constructed and lived in that edifice. All right. Supposedly with the study of pollen is just a beginning study right now. They don't have enough, they complain that they don't have enough money and enough resources to really utilize that science very well. And then lastly, C. Vance Haynes. This was a thesis in the 90s, I recall, as a student. This thesis conveys the conclusion that during the last supposed ice age, which was 13,000 years ago, they call it the Wisconsin era, that through water displacement in the shallow Bering Sea, Native Americans came from Central Asia across the Bering Sea on foot. And they also have evidence of the the movement and the what's the word when something it recedes, okay? The receding of two big glacial ice sheets. Because oftentimes, for instance, right, they'll catch big stones, will freeze into the glacial sheet, and then as it recedes, the stones make these huge divots in the land. And for instance, they have this very emphatically in New York. And then they have receded into, in some cases, lakes that exist to this day. Okay. So what they have found is they found evidence for two glacial sheets that receded, but they did not touch. And so there was a gap between them through Canada into North America. And it's known as the ice-free corridor, the ice-free walkway, if you will. Okay. So supposedly they came through there. Now, when they did tests in the 1990s, they looked at the mitochondrial DNA. And if my memory serves me correctly, I think that's through the mother's line, or I could be wrong. It could be the father's. But at any rate, they checked the mitochondrial DNA of people that they were hoping to be relatively purely of the ethnicity of Central Asian and Native American. And what they found is when they took the mitochondrial DNA from those students in the 90s, that they shared two rare genetic markers known as the Diego allele and the GMAT. Okay. So to some, right, that was evidence that there are biological ties between the people of Central Asia and Native Americans. And they saw that as proof that they migrated from Central Asia. In addition to that, they have some shared words with some of the tribes and linguistic groups of Native Americans with those of Central Asia. However, a lot of the terms, right, if not all of them, pertain to hunting, fishing, etc. So what could have happened, right, is instead of necessarily proving that that ties them biologically to and historically to each other, people know, right, that when different peoples meet through trade, right, that they borrow words from each other. The fancy word for it is syncretism, when you borrow a part of culture from one another. So at any rate, it did not bring about these findings in the 90s. They did not bring about a definitive consensus amongst scientists and historians, but they were definitely interesting to think about. So in 1997, they find at Monteverde, Chile, and at this place in Brazil, they find human habitations that are carbon dated to 30,000 years old. Well, so much for the Native Americans not coming until 13,000 years ago, right? If they could carbon date something much older than that. Then when they went through the ice-free corridor, they expected to find a carbon footprint. And a carbon footprint is proof of human habitation, right? People leave refuse of some sort, some type of garbage. They leave some type of evidence behind that they've inhabited an area. And they found little to none as far as a carbon footprint in the ice-free corridor. Evidence of hunting, staying and sleeping, going to the bathroom, etc., etc. So what I say is, right, is that therefore these methods are completely insufficient, and that we likely will never know what happened as far as the origin of Native Americans and their history long before Columbus. Okay, so see what I put here. Section number 1 of the Native American handout states that modern science can, quote, only get us so far in formulating an historical narrative of what happened when. The section begins by granting a concession to the opposing argument that methods like C14 dating, dendrochronology, thermoluminescence dating, stratigraphy, and isotope analysis shed light in forming an historical narrative. It then provokes skepticism of such methods, showing the limitations and citing exceptional circumstances in which those methods will fail to yield definitive information. For instance, notice I'm citing in my analysis a piece of supportive data, right? It states that dendrochronology will not work with complacent trees, that carbon-14 dating will not provide an accurate chronology if the amount of C14 in the atmosphere has not remained constant. The primary piece of evidence used to diminish confidence in modern science's capacity to create a narrative, however, is in refuting C. Vance Haynes' thesis of natives migrating from the steppes of Asia during the latest alleged ice age, just 13,000 years ago. The writer discourages trust in Haynes' scientifically derived theory via or by way of citation of 2 carbon-dated sites in South America prior to his timetable, and via stressing the scarcity of evidence for ancient humans having traversed or traveled across the ice-free corridor. Now, here's my evaluation. I said what the thesis was. I gave a couple examples of how it was defended, right? Now I say the writer cites his or her facts relatively faithfully and uses examples in support of his or her thesis that science cannot provide a definitive historical record. However, highlighting limitations and aberrant just means out of the ordinary, cases of scientific previous findings proving wrong does not merit an overhaul of all methods as permanently incapable of discerning the truth. Future advances in knowledge and technology may render a clear sight into the ancient past achievable, as there may exist plenty of hypotheses garnered from the aforementioned methods that have indeed passed the test of time already. That Haynes' theory may presently appear implausible, and that many methods do not yield trustworthy data under all circumstances, should not discourage fine-tuning these methods we have and discovering future means to continue our aim for definitive acquisition of ancient historical truths. So I'm saying that's unfair to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Just because there are a few out of the ordinary cases in which these methods, these scientific methods have not given us accurate information, doesn't mean we should throw those methods out. Doesn't mean that we can't, fine-tune those methods, right? So you see what I did on the evaluation? I thought it was an exaggeration. Okay, that it was an exaggeration by the writer. That yes, that is good to know that there are cases in which these methods will not work, but that doesn't mean we should throw out the methods or lose faith in the use of these methods in the future. You guys have any questions or comments?
I noticed that there was a bunch of like parts of the reading or the sections that were highlighted in red. Are those things that are of importance and that should be like something that can help us find like what's a really strong argument?
Yes.
And is it going to be in every single one, or is this just to start out helping us to find special and important information?
You know what? That's a good question. I definitely intended to do just that. What you said, Jonathan, is to have you pay special attention to what I highlight in red, and to be helpful. As far as doing it all semester long, gosh, I did not consciously do it all semester long, but I know that there are a few cases in future assignments that I have highlighted. And what I could do is I could go through them again and do such if you guys would like me to.
That may be helpful.
Sure, I could do that.
Also, question or more clarification, I would say, is essentially you had, so this is the response to that article about how scientific data like is inconclusive, and
Uh-huh.
then you summarize the points, kind of like acknowledging them, and then you refuted them or refuted the thesis and like said that you shouldn't throw out these methods because science continues to advance and innovate to like based off of these to continue to improvement.
That's
Is
right. That's
okay.
absolutely right. So
Okay.
yes, so the first one, right, there is a right or wrong answer, right?
Mhm.
As you saw in my analysis, there is a definitive thesis that I tried to convey
Yeah.
from a book that I've read or whatever, right? Um, and I am looking for that right off the bat. But your evaluation, like I said, that I just wanted to be thoughtful and intelligent.
Mhm.
Okay, I could care less, like I said, because these are not necessarily my theses. They come from books I've read, etc. I could care less if you tear into the credibility of every single one. I'm fine with that.
All right.
I had a question about if we should we research anything about the author of who wrote that and see if they had either or see what kind of perspective they had on the issue that they were writing on or some kind of bias or something.
Oh, you know what? You know what? In all my years of doing this, I have never had a student ask that, and that is such a logical question. That is a great question. So it's right here. It's Jane McIntosh.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Jane McIntosh. And I love that idea. I really do. I think that's a great idea. Like I said, if you do anything above and beyond, I'll reward you for it in points. But you don't have to. You don't have to. You could stick to just what's written before you, the data that's before you. But looking at the context of who Dr. Jane McIntosh is or was, her slant, her other works, I think that's brilliant. I would never tell a student, no, do not do that.
Okay. And then if we were to do that, would that be more in the evaluation or would that also help you in
Good
your
question.
argument?
Yes, that would be in the evaluation.
Okay.
Because regardless, right, regardless of where she's coming from, regardless of what her bias is, I still want to know that you discerned her thesis, right? Her thesis and an example of supportive data to that thesis. So absolutely, the part
Okay.
where you can employ your knowledge about her and her bias would be the evaluation for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
And are we shooting for around one paragraph for the analysis and then one paragraph for the evaluation? Or
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, Jake. You like I said, I deliberately never ask for a definitive length because some people write it'll take them a full page or a little more, and some people are just very concise and intelligent and do it in a short manner, and I am perfectly fine with that as well.
cool. All right, thank you.
No problem. No problem. All right. So do you guys have a decent feel for my class? A decent feel for what I'm asking? I hope so.
I would say so. Is this going to be what most of the assignments are going to be, like analyzing articles
That's
and
right.
thinking critically whether it's with whether you agree with it or
That's
disagree?
right.
Okay.
That's absolutely right. All right.
And
So yeah,
then
I had
that's my approach. Like I said, what I would probably recommend again, okay, is if you have the time and the chance, because every single section has at least one question pertinent to it on the test that's following. So please try to read all of them first before you choose one of them to analyze and evaluate. And not only that, right? It'll help you gain a little bit broader view, right, of the topic, other than the kind of myopic, the narrow, opinionated view that you're reading and doing. Yeah.
So you said we were writing these in a persuasive format. Is it supposed to be persuading? What are you supposed to be persuading of? Like whether or not you agree with the motives behind why the situation happened, or if it actually happened.
Not if it actually happened, okay? Like I said, I'd like to think that I use respectable enough of sources, right? Because remember, an historian, right, conveniently selects facts, but then, right, that historian is conveniently omitting other facts, right? So they're being manipulative with their data. But I'd like to think that you can trust the data, okay, that's used by these different writers and scientists and historians. It's not the data, but it's the use of it, right? It's the selection of the specific data, it's omission of other points. And so absolutely what you're trying to persuade me of is the second section on your evaluation. If what you read is credible, if it's fair, if it's believable or not, if it's persuasive. Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
no problem. All right. So yeah, I will do my best to get this posted for those who could not make it. Remember that you guys will always get extra credit points for attending. So I hope that you can continue to do so. But remember that as for now, our Zoom meetings will be Thursday afternoon at 4. Okay. If the pace is so quick that that I need to open up a second Zoom in the week, I will. But right now we're going to try to do just Thursday at 4. But you know, you already have this due on Thursday night or something like that. And so, you know, starting late, I had no choice because we have student learning outcomes as instructors. We have to cover a certain array of facts and topics. And so I kind of had no choice but to give you guys a bit of a hectic schedule where you just have 3 to 4 days to do each of them. So, so that's why today it stands out. It's anomalous. It's out of the ordinary of doing this 10 a.m. one. I wanted to give you guys time on the very first one before it's due. Okay. All right. Well, you guys, yes.
I just wanted to let you know that is there going to be a class this upcoming Thursday, or does it start next week?
No, this Thursday.
Okay, I won't be attending because I'm going to be helping out with an online conference.
Gotcha.
The
No,
funny
no
thing is,
problem.
actually, all 4 of us will be at that conference, so we will
Oh,
not be able to
shoot.
make it Thursday.
Okay. Okay. That's all right. Well, you get credit for today, and hopefully this helps. And yeah, like I said, that's why I don't have these mandatory. I understand that you guys have other things that you have to tend to. I mean, after all, that's probably why you're taking an online class, right? You don't have time to go, you know, 3 hours a week to a classroom at JC. So that's fine by me. That's okay. I'm gonna miss you guys though. You guys are a good group. Very intelligent, good questions, very attentive and vocal. I love it. So yeah, if you can try to meet with me the following Thursday. I'd love to have you. All right, and you'll get credit for today. All right. All right, you guys. Well, I still have 2 more Zooms and I gotta prepare for the next one. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna let you go. But honestly, I don't have to say this. You guys are a great group. I'm looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, Mr. Cowell. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
You
you,
guys have
Professor.
a good day, okay?
You too.
You as well.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.